Yes. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. It's Sunday, 6:30 in Melbourne, 6:30 p.m. in Melbourne, and I'm very glad that we have Neha Kabra as one of our guests, as another guest of Pipeline to Insights, and she's joining from another part of the world, UK. And
It's 9:30 a.m.
yes, hi, Neha.
Hi, everyone.
And yeah, thank you, Neha, for dedicating your Sunday, some part of your Sunday for this conversation. Really appreciate it. And also our audience who are joining. It's really valuable to see that they're spending their weekend or Sunday time with us. I'll give some more time for people to join. And by the way, you can
Thanks for
let
joining,
us,
guys. Appreciate it.
thank you. And yeah, you can let us know from which part of the world you're joining in the chat, or just say hi or welcome, Neha. How's been your Sunday so far? I know it's early morning. Probably you have your coffee, or if you're a coffee drinker, Neha. Beautiful. Now I need to remind my geography to understand the flag. Do you know? Not good at geography. Nigeria, I guess. The last one. Welcome. Thank you so much. India, perfect. All right. I think we can start. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, welcome to another Pipeline to Insights live session. And I'm so glad again to have Neha Kabra as uh, our guest today. Neha has spent nearly 2 decades helping banks and large organizations turning strategy, AI, technology, and data into measurable business value. She also writes on humanizing, always
Humanizing, yeah.
humanizing on
It's a bit of
Substack.
a mouthful, yeah.
Exactly. And I like the A and I in between that you bolded, which is quite interesting. And yeah, exploring what it means to become more AI native without becoming less human. And yeah, over to you, Neha. Want to do an introduction about yourself?
Very happy to. Irfan, thank you for having me. And guys, thanks for joining Sunday morning, afternoon, or evening, like Irfan, wherever you are. A very big hi to you. I am a partner with McKinsey in London, and I basically work with clients, which is enterprise clients, on a range of cross-cutting topics. So it all starts with, setting up enterprise strategy, and then really doing a bunch of things around, data, technology, operating model, AI, to really generate value. So when everybody talks about, AI pilots and, ROI that is not really achievable, I've kind of lived that like for the last couple of years on a daily basis. So I can hopefully share some insights and some of my tricks and tools for you on how you could solve for that. And as Irfan mentioned, I write Humanizing on Substack, which is essentially my newsletter that aims to solve for, not making AI more human. Like that's not exciting enough for me. It's all about organizations and enterprises that actually want to become more AI native, how they should like try to maintain the human side of things while becoming AI native, right? So very much looking forward to this conversation, and thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Neha, and yeah, thanks everyone again for joining. And so when I was, thank you, uh, when I was like thinking to have this conversation with Neha, there were a lot of things in my mind. For example, one of them was that thinking about AI now is like taking more of engineer works. I mean, the way traditionally we were doing the works, and now there is always a question for me: what becomes more important for us, not less? And now I'm going to start this discussion with Niha. Uh, let's start with my first question. As I said, I think everyone knows now AI is getting better at writing
Yeah.
codes and so on. Like each month, new model comes. Like have better benchmarking. I think we all here following this news or every now and then. So from where you sit, from the your all your experience and background, what actually changing about what makes an engineer, either data engineer or AI engineer or related,
Yeah.
valuable?
Yeah. So this is a question that kind of gets like debated and discussed in every single program that I have done or am doing right now. And the basic thesis that we should remember is very simple, which is that, just because you build something, the users will not come. And just because they come once doesn't mean that they will, come repeatedly. And the value that you generate in whatever you do actually sits when users start, basically coming back to a system and using it repeatedly, right? So with that in mind, I think the biggest thing that engineers, data engineers, software engineers, AI engineers should keep in mind as they build anything is to really think about business consequences, user consequences of whatever they are doing, right? And so, for example, if you are a data engineer and you're really thinking about your ETL frameworks and building data pipelines, try to understand whether, 3 levels, 4 levels, downstream of your work, when the report actually reaches the management team, will they be able to make the right decision? Because the gap that you actually see most often is that, there is great technical work on pipelines, etc. But then when the dashboard actually reaches the management teams, their understanding is completely different from what you intended. And therefore, then you get into this, very bad feedback loop of, okay, this is not working, change it, you change it again, and then you again, it's like a never ending cycle that you get into. So I would just urge that more and more, you've got to think about business first, user first, and then really kind of try to think about your path from there on, right? That would be my take on this, Irfan.
Beautiful. And just to follow up that, do you have a like any specific or real situation you or you've seen it or in your team or from your client
Yeah.
that uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's far too many, but I'm going to pick one for you now.
yeah.
So basically, so we did recently, when I say recently, I mean like end of 2024, a contact center transformation for one of the largest banks globally. And the idea was obviously to, shift demand to more digital, channels, right? Or basically, um, the customer should not need to call your human agents in the contact center, right? So it was largely a productivity initiative, but also with the underpinning, digital setup underneath it, right? And so we basically started by picking a model. We went with, I think, at that point, because we had to take tokens into consideration and the costs, etc. I think it was like GPT 3.5, right, with a 15K window or something. And the idea was that you want to use that model, put a bunch of transcripts through the model, and let the model throw up how to understand and interpret those transcripts, right? So when a customer calls you, the model should not just tell you that, oh, the customer is calling you to make a bill payment, but the model should be actually able to assess the conversation with the customer and tell you that it's bill payment, but the customer is calling because their mobile app is locked, or maybe because they are making a high value payment, right? Or maybe they are not able to set up a payee online. So the idea was
Yep.
to understand deeper reasoning behind why the customers are calling as opposed to just knowing that the customers are calling, right? So we did a whole framework around it. We did it, for, I think there were 20 million calls that came into that contact center. We analyzed, I think 5 million of them just to get a reasonable sample size and stuff. So big bunch of work done around it, a lot of cost incurred. And then I think like one fourth of the way into the work, so when 25% of the analysis was done, we realized that we've actually not gone back and actually discussed with the contact center leaders, the team leaders in the contact center, on whether they interpret and understand our classification in the same way as the model understands it. So, whether they are on the same page with that classification as the model is throwing out. And then we discovered that about 80% of those classifications and intents were changed
Mhm.
because what the model did, and I'll just give you one simple example, the model basically started classifying, internal transfers as bill payments. But internal transfer is not a bill payment, it's just transfer from one account to the other, right? But if you imagine you're getting 2 million calls on internal transfer and the model is recommending, that it be addressed as a bill payment issue, you're solving for a completely different problem. So this is why I want to like give this concrete example to say that just because you build a framework or have a deployed model that works doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it will work in the context of understanding of the business. And ultimately your users, like which is the contact center agents or the head of the contact center, has to be completely comfortable that this is usable in the question of their domain, right? So that's one example, but happy to give you many others through the course of this conversation.
No, no, this is really good, and I think what you just mentioned is what you or the team observe and use their judgment to understand what is
Correct.
working, what is not working. And we've heard judgment word in last 2 years a lot. Judgment
I
is
mean, I used it a
important.
lot also. So, yeah.
Exactly. And it's good that now we went through it with an example. And I think judgment is hard to define and even harder to teach. So, how
Yeah.
do you tell the difference between someone with good technical judgment and someone who just experienced?
Yeah. Okay. So, 2 points there. First is I don't think you can just understand judgment without understanding the two steps that come along with it. In my opinion, that's how I use judgment, right? So, step one for me is translation, which is really understanding what you are trying to solve for and whether everybody who's on your team, whether it is technical, non technical, whether they understand the problem in the same way. So just going back to my contact center example, we thought we were solving bill payments problem, but turned out it was an internal transfers problem. This might seem like a very small idea, but when you have 2 million calls coming in into the contact center on internal transfers, you know that the system is not working as intended, right? Like, and these are like simple account to account transfers. So this should not happen, right? So the first thing I would do is
Correct.
start with translation, establish a common understanding in simple words across technical and non technical people of what you are really trying to solve. The next step then is judgment. The judgment is once you understand the problem statement in a common way, you then want to lay out all the choices and the trade offs. So let's say there are three ways to solve a particular problem. You want to basically lay out all the choices and the trade-offs very clearly in non-technical terms, and then get people to align on it. So to my mind, that is judgment. Judgment is whether you're able to take a problem statement, translate it into specific choices, and really get everybody to align with on a single set of choice, right? That's
Yeah.
judgment. And then there is like a downstream thing, which is just translation or judgment is not adequate. You've got to be ultimately able to inspire and mobilize the system around you to execute that as well, right? So again, going back to the contact center example, I could have aligned everything with the head of contact center, but just because the head of contact center is aligned doesn't mean that the 1,000 agents, like human agents that work with him or her, are aligned as well. So that is where orchestration, like the ability to mobilize the system, comes. So as somebody who has technical judgment versus somebody who has just the experience, going back to your question, but I think this setup was necessary so I could have made the distinction properly. Somebody who has technical judgment will be able to think about translation, judgment, and orchestration, all of it. So not just, if I'm building this data pipeline, is the data scientist going to find it helpful? But if I'm building this data pipeline, is the ultimate user, which is, let's say, the head of a private equity operating company, whether they are going to be able to use it, right? So a
Mhm.
technically sound person would actually think about the whole frame, and somebody who's just experienced might just try to find a problem, and they might just try to solve the problem in the best technical way possible, because technology is their experience, right? But let's just remember that just because there is a technology solution to it which is elegant, does not mean that that is workable in the context of an enterprise, right? So that is how I would basically see the difference.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really love, I think, the explanation around judgment. I think that's one of the best I've heard. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh, uh, Again, I would love to say thank you for everyone who joining recently and who've been listening to us. And feel free to ask your questions around this topic that we've been discussing. You can just send it in our chat, and we are more than happy to address them. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Neha. Now, you said on both sides, I think you also touch base on that technical delivery and enterprise strategy. What is the most common way engineers misjudge what the business needs from their work?
Yeah. So I think like it boils down to this one simple question that I still think 80% engineers start with, which I think is the wrong question. Um, so assuming, the business gives you a requisition for, hey, this is what I need to be done, right? And this is what we want to build, right? If the first question that comes to your mind is, you know what, I have a very cool technology, or I have this, system available, or I have done it in five other instances, and I this is easy to do, I can easily do it, you're probably
Mhm.
getting it wrong. Okay. And the reason I say that is we have, just like continuing with the line of contact center example, right? Like if you like we build a behavioral AI system around it, which ultimately became a repeatable system across many other contact center transformations that I've led. But basically we started by asking all the right things, whether this model will be able to throw out the right breakdowns, whether this model will consume a lot of tokens, whether this model gets loopy, whether we had the right systems and balances in place to track it, right? So we asked all the right questions. And remember, we asked this question end of 2024, even before token costs had become a challenge. So in that sense, we had like looked at all the technical questions and we had the right answer for those technical questions. But what we did
Mhm.
not do is we basically did not ask the head of contact center till we were 25% into the process whether this actually works for them. So I would just go back to the point and I would say that if your first reaction to when you get a requisition from a business is, how can I use something existing to make it work, or hey, I know the technology solution to it and this can be done in 3 months, you are probably getting it wrong. What you should be doing is you should be really sitting down with the person who actually sent you the requisition.
Mhm.
Try to use the framework of translation, judgment, orchestration that I just shared, which is first establish a shared understanding of the problem. The business user might have, an explanation of the problem in their mind, and you might understand it completely differently. So don't
Mhm.
rely on requisitions, written requisitions, rely on a conversation. Then make sure that based on what they want to solve, you have applied effective judgment to lay out proper choices in front of them and take them along when you make the choice or the decision. And then, of course, next is, orchestration, which is more downstream, which comes a little bit later, right? But that is essentially keeping every single user in the mind when you design something. So I have done a lot of like many transformations, right? Like technology data. But even now, and just because human mind operates in a biased way, if something is our strength, which for any engineer, technology is a strength, we tend to think technology first. I would think we should think business first. And the framework of translation, judgment, orchestration, like literally works every single time because it helps you, take a 180-degree view of the problem, right? So that's my take. Yeah.
Nice. So the framework is transformation, judgment. and orchestration.
Translation, judgment, and orchestration. Yes, that's right.
Okay, beautiful. Yeah, I would love to spend some time and kind of map what I've been doing with this framework in the past. But yeah, I love this framework. I would love to explore more
Amazing.
about it. And now let's talk about communication. First of all,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your answer, Neha. And thanks for everyone joining recently and listening to us in Sunday. What separates an engineer who technically is strong but gets talked over in the room from ones who equally is strong and gets listened?
Yeah. I mean, like I talk for a living, basically. So I can probably share 2 cents on this one. I think the biggest challenge that I have seen, which I think is easy to correct, is um, any engineer that I've had a conversation with tend to start with the most technically elegant solution of doing something. But I would actually
Mhm.
urge you to take a step back and I would urge you to read the room. So if you have, a business person who is sitting in the room and who is the main decision maker on something, you potentially cannot go back to them and say, hey, you know what, we are going to use a GPT 3.5, we are going to like create a behavioral AI framework, the model is going to be like 15,000 context window, we are going to like create JSON prompts to basically get into the model. You cannot have that conversation. That doesn't work. This might sound funny, but the number of times I have seen this conversation play out, including very recently when I did it myself once, like literally 2 months back, and I wrote about it on LinkedIn, um, is just again we go back to the biases, right? We just feel it's comfortable for us to talk in the way that we think we can explain best. But just because you can explain something in the particular way doesn't mean that the person sitting in front of you understands it. So the thing that separates more effective engineers from less
Mhm.
effective engineers is actually not technical skills, because I firmly believe that technical skills are increasingly getting more commoditized with AI. Like AI can do a lot of things better, and today is the worst that
Yeah.
AI is only going to be, and it's getting better from here on, right? So we just need to keep that thing in mind. But I think you should be able to read the room, and you should be able to translate. This is why I go back to my translation framework, right? You need to be able to translate whatever you want to say in a way that the person sitting in front of you understands. Now, this is easy to say but hard to implement, because imagine when you're trying to translate something in somebody else's understanding, and then the very second or third question you drift back to technical terms, it's not going to work. Like I have been guilty of this as well, right? So I mean, it just happens. We're just like biased to go back to the ways in which we like to talk, right? So for anybody who wants to become a distinguished engineer, yes, I mean, technical skills are great, but it's the bare minimum. You've got to think about your interpersonal skills, and you've got to read the room and really frame whatever you want to say in a way that the other person understands. And the most effective method of doing that is before the meeting, take 30 minutes to prep. Maybe you can do it on your own. You can really do it with somebody else who is non technical. So don't get one of your other engineer friends and talk to them, because two technical people are only going to talk in technical terms. I mean, I've been accused of this also, right? When I talk to fellow consultants, I start using jargons very quickly, right? So this is what is going to happen, right? Try to get somebody who represents the kind of people that you will be sitting with in the room when making a decision, and rehearse with them for
Mhm.
30 minutes. I think that the insight that you will get from that one conversation will actually translate into far more effective conversation than just trying to talk to another technical person or doing things technically. So my takeaway message is read the room and prepare the conversation based on who is sitting with you in the room, and not in a way that you can explain it best, right? Yeah,
Mhm.
that's a big differentiator. It's
Good.
easier said than done,
Um,
but it's a good habit. Yeah.
exactly. So regarding to the example you mentioned, and that was very quite interesting example, like in terms of we going to executives and say we need this model because of this context, because of
Yeah.
that. So like so if you I'm just trying to give one proper way of like how a
Sure.
technical person handle this. Can you give me an example like that you mentioned this is not a right this is like not a best way to talk with like executive too
Yeah.
technical. You give an example now. How would you think, what would you think we need to take this
Yeah.
when we
Okay, so I will give you one other story because I think we have used the
Mhm.
contact center example far too much. We should use something else now. So
Sure,
so
sure.
you know, I'll give you one other example, and I will actually then also give you the suggested framework on how this could be done, right?
Yeah.
And well, I mean, you're talking to somebody from McKinsey, so frameworks are bound to happen. So take what you want and leave what you want, right? Like it is what it is, right? But basically, so this was a couple of years back when we were trying to actually build a new mobile app for a global bank. And
Mhm.
we did all of the design work, we did feature benchmarking, we spoke to customers, all of that, right? So we had like a complete plan laid out on how we would actually deliver the app capabilities over the next 12 months, right? And then it boiled down to like technical specifications and aligning on the technical specifications. Now, the mandate that the board of directors of this particular bank had given us is that we want, because the bank is present across multiple countries, so we want this app to look very consistent and standard, in different countries, because we want similar user experience and all of that, right? And we
Yeah.
want like a standardized code based and everything. So the technology that everybody recommended, my technical folks from McKinsey and others, right, like, and the client side, we recommended was, okay, let's use Flutter to do this thing because it's like more standardized as a language, it'll work better, right? And then before we launched execution with Flutter, right, we basically did a benchmarking of the talent capabilities, the engineering capabilities of this particular bank in question. And we discovered that they actually had more of React Native engineers, more of their engineers that use their proprietary SDKs and stuff, right? So this is why I keep on telling you that just because you have a technologically elegant solution does not mean that it is a technologically workable solution. So then we had to go back to the board and we had to basically get them to revisit this point of having 80% standardization. We still would have some standardization, but more like 40 to 60% depending upon the country, right? And so
Mhm.
this was a big shift, because imagine if the board of directors has approved something and then you're going back to them and you're basically revisiting. Now, this required next level communication skills, obviously, and a lot of thesis and stuff around why we want that change to happen. By the way, the chief technology officer in this question just did not want to go to them, because for him, he felt like, this was something that, is a reflection on him and his ability to deliver rather than the technological gaps in the company, right? And so, first is you have to understand why this was done. And now that you have that understanding, we basically said, look, the best way to frame this is to basically think about it in a top down communication way, which is
Mhm.
really start with, just give the bad message upfront, right? Just
Mhm.
say that, look, this is not going to happen. We are going to do this. So that's like hard hitting message upfront. You've just delivered it, right? And then
Mhm.
give them 3 to 4 reasons of why you need to do that and why it will actually be more effective. So in this case, we started by saying,
Sure.
back, dear board, we cannot do 80% standardization. At best, we can give you 50% standardization. So, headline message delivered. Okay. Then you
Mhm.
basically give them the logic. You say that it's not just about, technologically elegant solution, but something that, becomes, more sustainable as a framework that your organization that can continue to deliver, because it's never just about building, it's also about maintaining, right? So we then explain them
Correct.
with the logic of, why Flutter versus React Native, why React Native. We explain them that how 50% standardization is not going to be very different in user experience from, let's say, 80% standardization, because ultimately the user can go to any country and get a different app as long as the things that they want to do on the app get done easily. So users are not looking for standardization in design. It was more a company ask to standardize the design, right? Because of the branding or whatever else, right? So, my recommendation, if you want to deliver a tough message or if you want to really talk to somebody who's trying to solve for a specific thing, is start with the headline of why that thing can be done or not done. and then give them
Mhm.
reasons in support of your answer. I mean, we call it top down communication. It's a McKinsey framework, but that literally works every single time. What we try to do is the other side of this is if we try to build the whole story around this and then come to the conclusion of why something can be done or not done, you're basically talking to senior management. They don't have the mind share. You capture their attention in the first 60 seconds, which is with a headline, you capture the attention. And once you have their attention, you then explain to them. If you try it any other way, they're just going to be confused with what you're trying to do. Because imagine going to a board of directors or a CEO and telling them, you know what, we are not going to use Flutter, we are going to use React Native. The CEO is probably going to be, okay, so like go and talk to the CTO. Like, what do you want me to do about it? Right. So like you just need to think through who's in the room and then, do the top down communication that I mentioned. It like literally works every single time.
Thank you so much, Neha, for your great example. And yeah, I hope our audience find it helpful. I also work with a lot of general managers and executives, like every now and then in our meetings. So
You know that,
it
yeah.
was
You know
it
the
was
drill,
really,
yeah.
and I made this exactly. I made some mistakes going through too technical before, and now I'm gradually learning. And thanks for your recommendation. Um, just question from our audience. Feel free to just ask your questions if you have any, and we're more than happy to address it. And thank you so much again for joining and listening to us. Now, well, it's clear that human to human communications are still essential for engineers, of course. Thank you so much for it. Yes, I think
Yeah, I
I
think
do
more,
agree.
more than ever before, actually. More than ever before. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Uh, now let's look at in different lens. So far, we
Sure.
talked about what individual engineers can do. If we flip the lens, what's the leader's job here? How can data
Hmm.
leaders push team members past what's comfortable and create real opportunities for them to shine instead of boxing people into whatever their job title says they are allowed to do?
Yeah. This is a very relevant question because AI is probably not going to automate any job, like unless you're doing like some very basic synthesis or note taking or something, right? But I like to really break down a job into tasks, right? So AI will basically, automate certain tasks or activities in a job, which means that the job might still remain, but the nature of how the job, like what the job looks like, will be completely different, right? So, for example, as an example, for a data scientist or a data engineer, AI might automate like 40% of your job, right? Like with, extensive pipeline cleanups and data cleanups and stuff. And then you might be left with more of translation, judgment, orchestration, as an example, right? So for me, the biggest thing that any individual needs to do, whether technical or non technical, and whether it's supported by the line manager or you find other ways of doing it, because I know how enterprises work, it's not very easy, like they can't just change job descriptions overnight, is to really try and
Mhm.
develop T-shaped skills, right? So the vertical of the T is basically your deep domain expertise into something. You could have deep domain expertise into data engineering, your data scientist, you could be like a machine learning engineer, AI engineer, you could be like, somebody who even like understands a particular industry well, or somebody who understands a particular function well. So that is your deep domain expertise, right? And then the bar of the T, the horizontal bar, is basically how you need to think about jobs surrounding your deep expertise and try to like
Mhm.
create a view or build some skill sets around those jobs as well. So as an example, historically data engineers and data scientists have already like really operated more or less in like isolated mechanisms, right? So yeah, they talk but maybe once in a while, not like no exchange of information like on an ongoing basis, right? But if I were a data engineer, I would basically think downstream and I would try to really like build some skill sets around how can you actually not just get to the structured data, but what sort of like things you can do with that structured data to create information for your management, right? And I think
Mhm.
this is very important because um, like I said, AI will automate parts of your job, it will not automate full job. So that is why just being a deep technical expertise in something has now become the bare minimum. So till a few years back, it was very celebrated if you had specialized, skill set, and you had like the ability to do some very specialized work. But now
Exactly.
it is you need that. It's bare minimum, but you need to, like, it's not sufficient. You need to expand out. And the most classical example I can give you on this one, it might not happen in your organization, but we can all read industry trends, is the forward deployed engineer. So the
Yeah.
forward deployed engineer, something that, Palantir launched years back, but now literally every single organization is picking it up, is because engineering is no longer just about engineering. It is about so much more. It is about, establishing the fit. It is about, being able to like think through the workflow concretely. It is about, taking it to the user, having the feedback loops in place, because ultimately any role will survive, or any individual will survive in that particular role, if you can link it to value. And you can never link something to value just by having
Mm.
deep domain expertise and not really talking to people who are actually going to use it. So for
Yeah.
me, if the leaders can support, their talent in some way, or if, whether your organization does it or not, if you had to build your own skill set, think about T-shaped skills and think about what anthropics of the world are trying to do with FDEs, right? You need much more than deep technical expertise now to be relevant in the age of AI.
Beautiful. Yeah. 100% I agree. And thanks for sharing this. Yeah. That's great to hear. And any questions from our audience? Just feel free to ask. And again, thanks for listening. Um, I think if you were advising data engineers or AI engineers, I think at some point you mentioned the domain expertise, but that's what leaders maybe also can help them as well. But
Sure.
which two or three skills would you do you suggest to data engineers or any type of related engineers they need to invest over the next, like it's hard to say next few years, but over the next six
Yeah.
months, 1 or 2 year, and which skill would you spend less time? Which skill would they need to spend less time trying perfect? I know it's hard to answer this,
Uh,
but
well,
what do you think?
I think like I mean, people tend to use the word systems thinking a lot. And I think engineers already have some, hand like hold some hold over like systems thinking. So that is something you should keep. But I just think like the definition of systems thinking is has changed or is changing, right? So,
Right.
systems thinking traditionally meant like you actually observe behaviors across a certain set of systems. If you make changes to one system, you should be able to like, predict, right, in a fairly deterministic way, like three steps down the line on another system, what the impact is going to be, right? So that's system thinking, right? You basically study interconnectedness of the system, and you're able to, um, categorically specify the system behaviors if something were to be done, right? But I think like because AI as a technology is different, it is more probabilistic in nature than deterministic. It's
Oh,
just, and it is also doing a lot of work on its own. So yes, I mean, you can create a
mhm.
whole system around agentic AI and you can make it work. So therefore, like systems thinking definition for me personally has changed. So for me, systems thinking now is more about understanding what you are getting, you know from like upstream stuff that AI has already done. So what I mean by that is, look, I mean, AI is amazing at generating fantastic great looking outputs, right? But one of the ways in which you and I learn things, at least I learn things, is when I had to build those outputs from scratch first time. And I did it like probably 1,000 times in my career. And then I started having the judgment on, this is the pattern that works, this is the pattern that doesn't work. But when AI actually gives you ready outputs that come to your table, and then you need to like understand, the output based on what AI has generated for you without being, involved in, effectively generating it from scratch, The skill you need to build is how do you actually read the AI output in an effective way. This means that you should not just be able to like read and understand what is in front of you. You should also be able to understand if AI might have not taken anything into consideration as it
Mm.
created those that output, right? Or whether AI is hallucinating again and creating like parts of that output just out of thin air rather than being based on credible data, or whether AI's interpretation is even good enough, right? Compared to what the business interpretation would be, right? So the first skill that you want to build is the ability to read, understand, question, and critically evaluate any output that AI generates that gets in front of you. I think that is very important,
Yeah.
particularly because
Mhm.
you're not involved in building that output from scratch. So you're just getting a half baked AI product, right? So that's point number one. Point number two is you should then be able to think through that if this output, you were to do some work on this output, you were to enhance it, and it was going to go back to AI and then go back to another human downstream, what would be the implications of this on that other human who gets now, the output that is worked on by AI, but also some enhancements made by you? So that is like the downstream implications of this, right? Now, for me, with the work that is changing, I would go back to the same thing again, that you need to be able to translate, you need to be able to have the judgment, and you need to be able to orchestrate in the right way. Because if you think through the systems thinking explanation that I just gave you, it literally boils down to those three conditions, right? You should be able to translate, which means understand very clearly what AI is generating and why that output works. You should be able to like judge how you can enhance this output, what are the choices you need to make, and then you should be able to orchestrate as downstream. So for me that framework remains very important. And then the other thing I would add in terms of what you should not be doing or not be spending time on is, I think we tend to fantasize too much about every new tool that comes in the market. So every week there is a new model, there is open source, there is closed source, there is like a different tool, there is different experimentation. Please guys, like don't spend time just trying to like look in, unless you're like an influencer whose job is to like create some content around every new flashy tool that comes in the market. That's great because it's supporting you in your work. I would really be very clear about what I am engaging with, where I am spending my time, and really being very very intentional about what I really want to perfect, because it helps me in my work, right? So the thing that you should absolutely not do is run behind every new tool that comes. Like subtraction is key. Like the less your focus is, the better. Go deeper into one area and really like build out adjacencies, which is like the horizontal of the T, across that beyond that domain, right? So it's a bit of a long answer, but I think it's important to understand like the challenges that AI poses so that you can actually respond to it in an effective way.
Beautiful. Yeah. Love your touch base on a lot of noises that happening in the, uh,
Yeah.
nowadays. And actually, I've been thinking about it in last few days. I think could be another topic for another live to know
Absolutely. Like, yeah,
how we differentiate these noise, how we just not confuse with these noise and try to detect which one we need, which part we need to invest, or which tool,
yeah.
which solution we need to invest more instead of just trying to use everything and maybe generate nothing.
I mean,
Amazing.
one of the things that like I always tell my clients is to not just focus on activity, because activity will, it'll just keep you busy, right? So you should not focus on activities, but you should focus on value added activities, right? There is huge difference. So just vibe coding one app every weekend, I mean, it's great, but to what end? Like, what are you going to do with it? How does it create value for you, right?
Mhm.
So I think like always try to think about whether anything that you're going to do next is value oriented. It helps you either become a better domain expert, helps you build those T-shaped skills. It is testing your translation, judgment, orchestration. But if it's just vibe coding a new app with a new tool every weekend, like honestly, like I am exhausted, I stopped doing it. Just wanted to say that. Now, there could be once in a while, once every 2, 3 months, there's like this fantastic tool that you really just want to try because you would feel out of place in your work if you don't do it. Absolutely, pick it and do it, right? But it doesn't have to be like a every weekend, every alternate day thing, right? It's too much.
I agree. 100%. 100%. Nice. It's great. And I think we're kind of closing soon. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for your time. By the way, about
Thanks,
this
guys.
framework, um, sorry, Neha,
No,
so
I was just saying thanks, guys, for joining. Yeah, go on,
thank
please.
you. Yeah, uh, this framework that you mentioned, I might see, I might have seen it on your Substack, but do you have a post about that or
Yeah,
something that?
yeah. I actually, wrote about this, I think last week with Alex from Arc Strategy. So we actually, had a discussion around this, and there is a post live. I'm happy to share it with you, and if you want to, like, just share
Yeah,
it across,
of
then
course.
that's fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be great. So I'll post it as part of the video. And where can my pipeline to insights audience can find you besides your
Um.
Substack?
s well, yeah. So besides my Substack, you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Neha Kabra, as simple as that. And yeah, I'd love to connect. And I'm always, interested in, listening to, let's say, ideas on how to bring technical and non-technical worlds together. Like my literal like newsletter is called Humanizing. So I do believe that there is an AI world, and as you pointed out, Irfan, A and I in red. So there is an AI first world. You should not try to challenge it. But I think what we need to solve for altogether is really what is the human element or in that AI first world, and how do we really make sure that organizations, even though they might be becoming more AI native, they will become more human first, right? So
Mhm.
I think that's something that I'm constantly looking to have a debate and discussion on. And I firmly believe that technology is for humans and not the other way around. So whatever we do has to be net accretive to humans, right? And so if that is the kind of stuff that interests you beyond all the technical execution that all of us do, then yes, let's connect. Absolutely.
First, don't forget to connect with Neha if you got any questions, especially subscribe to her Substack, Humanizing. Hopefully, I pronounced it correct.
You
And
did well. You did well.
and anything else you wanted to add, Neha, before we close?
Um, I mean, look, I think this is a very exciting time, and all of us should be very excited and energized about what is happening around us. But it is also a time where a lot of our understanding of how traditional systems work, including the traditional job market, including the way traditional enterprise setups work, including the way systems have behaved traditionally, is changing. What AI is doing is it is really like, the baseline level of intelligence is increasing. So the floor is rising. But then at the same time, the ceiling has no limit. Like you can literally do anything with focus and with the right sort of T shaped skills and with the whole, translation, judgment, orchestration framework, right? So it is a very exciting time, but it is also a time when, this is basically all power to us. We can do what we want. We can either continue to do AI slop or we can really build something with AI, right? So that's what I want to leave you guys with, right? Like think about it, be very intentional. Otherwise, just like social media, AI slop can just take up a lot of your time. And it's honestly, it's not worth it. Um, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That's interesting. Yeah, I really love that. And yeah, I think we mentioned a lot the word traditional. AI makes a lot of things in traditional, like make it traditional.
Correct.
Now we need to think
Exactly.
about it. All right, thank you so much.
Exactly.
Really appreciate Niham and our audience. Thanks for spending your time, your Sunday, uh, with us. And yeah, hope you enjoy. I genuinely enjoy it, and I'll send the recap and the video shortly to our both audience. And yeah, that's it for me. If there is no question, then we can close this live session soon. We just wait for 1 minute. And thank you, Neha,
Sure.
again for
And
your.
thanks, Irfan, for having me. Amazing conversation. And of course, thanks to everyone who joined the call on, their respective Sunday time zones, right? So appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Abin, if I pronounce your name.
Thanks,
Neha.
Abhinav.
Thank you so much. Cheers. All right. See you next time. Thanks, Neha, and thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Irfan. Bye bye. Take care. Bye.